Okay, so we have to say something intelligent then? Yeah, James, put it on 2 bare seconds, I actually say something smart. What's that? Just put it on the 2 bare seconds, I actually say something smart. Okay. Yeah.
Don't do that. Do you honestly think I'm a gentleman, or are you just clever?
Yeah, I'm just clever.
As long as you get that clear. Okay.
We know who we really are.
Or maybe just wishful thinking.
Yeah, well, you know, if you want someone to behave well, you treat them as if they behave well. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it don't. Yeah, so if I treat you with respect, maybe it'll be forgiven. Okay, our discussion today actually harks back to some correspondence I had with somebody doing research. This is several years ago now. And I felt the need to bring this up again because this question does come up from time to time, and you want to be well equipped to deal with it, and you want to be able to answer. What is the basic issue is whether or not a Gentile in the Messianic movement must convert to a Messianic Jewish status in the congregation. And that's the basic issue. And in the, I'll give it to you, hopefully we'll have something posted. People can download this so they can see what the abstract is. This will be posted so they can download it? Yes. Okay. Anyways, the abstract is the conversion of non-Jews to Messianic Judaism, a test case of membership and identity in a new religious movement response. Okay, so what was given to me was some questions, and I had given my response, and Mark was nice enough to hand me today, this morning, actually a compilation of all the responses, and so I'll probably add to this, maybe have another discussion on this sometime in the future, compiling and comparing the differences and the similarities between my response and others. More said in short that a lot of other people agree with the same, so it had the same position. It's not that they consulted me, they had the same position. Which is nice to know that I'm not the only voice in the wilderness, that others have a similar idea. Anyways, so the abstract is a list of questions, and here they are. As well, I'll give them to you in the answers that I have. It says, do you have your own personal policy or views on conversion of non-Jews to Messianic Judaism? Yes, no. If yes, please give details and or attach a response. My answer is yes, I have an opinion. There is no biblical or functional need for Gentiles to convert to be Messianic Jews. Attached below is my lecture notes on the role of the Gentile in the Messianic movement. And I'm going to add that to it's at the bottom of my responses here, so it's already attached to what you've got. Okay. That's basically the answer. The rest of the details. Number 2, does your congregation organization have a policy on conversion of non-Jews to Messianic Judaism? Yes or no? If yes, please give details. That's your response. It says no, there is no need for such conversion. Number 3, to what extent are you in favor of the conversion process for non-Jews who believe in Yeshua as Messiah, who wish to become Messianic Jews? One very little, not at all. So 5, definitely, and I put down 1, which is consistent with the command. Please give your reasons for your choice. And here's the main body of what I had to say. This is addressed by Rabbi Shaul in his letter to the Galatians. See Galatians 1, verses 6 and 7, 2, 3, and 14 to 16. Law in this place identifies the traditions of the Pharisees or modern times of Messianic imitation of Orthodox Judaism. Chapter 3, verses 1 to 6. Again, law equals Phariseeism or Messianic conversion. 4, 8 to 11, verses 17 and 31. Also 5, 1 through 6 and 11. In this case, circumcision was the token of conversion to Pharisaism. 6, 12, and 13. Some Messianic Judaism. Some of Messianic Judaism are embarrassed to acknowledge to the Orthodox the presence of Gentiles in their congregations, as if this weakens their standing before the Orthodox, failing to boldly proclaim the inclusion of Gentiles as a sign of Messianic prophecy, such as Yeshayahu, Isaiah 2, verses 2 to 4, 9, 2, 56, 1 through 8, Zechariah 2, 10 to 11, 8, 20, and 23, and Micah 4, 1 to 3. See also Colossians 2, verses 8 to 23. That was the main response. And that's the whole Bible study. If you want to sit down and look up all those verses, that's pretty much the explanation of why Gentiles must be part of the Messianic community as Gentiles. Because frankly, we are answered to prophecy. Is prophecy come alive as Gentiles in the Messianic movement? If we deny that, if we lessen that, if we try to change it, if we're embarrassed by it, we deny prophecy. Number 4, to what extent are you against a conversion process for non-Jews who believe in Yeshua as Messiah to become Messianic Jews? One, very little, and very much. Of course, that was 5. Please give your reason for your choice. Please see response in number. Okay, I did an error here. It should be response in number 3. As this was printing, I caught that mistake, so any future edition of this is going to be corrected. Right there should be see, please see response in number 3. If conversion to Messianic Judaism can take place under certain conditions or in exceptional circumstances, what would they be? My answer was no such circumstance immediately comes to mind. I can't think of a reason why somebody would, on an emergency or philosophical or societal or emotional reason why someone must convert. Okay. And so number 5, if conversion to Messianic Judaism can take place under certain conditions or exceptions. Did I just say that? Yeah, that's what okay. Here's the issue. What's the real issue that's trying to be done with causing or ordering or requiring a Gentile to do some sort of a certification process so that you can have a sheepskin that says, I am now converted to Messianic Judaism? What's the benefit to the bearer for that certificate?
Well, you get one just like Yeshua gave out to his converts.
Yeah, just like Yeshua gave up, yeah.
What's the benefit?
What's the benefit? Think about it. You can take this and go to another Messianic congregation. Okay? Will that give you instant status as a Gentile?
No, but it might give them a big laugh.
Okay, well, it may not be. Now here's the thing. Part of the background issue, part of the reason that this... Mark is pointing something. No, actually, in the questionnaire they gave me, it was yeah. Okay, I'll have to research that. Here's the problem. What does it really benefit you by doing a conversion process? Okay? Will the Orthodox accept you as being Jewish?
No.
No, so it's totally meaningless.
Right.
Okay? Outside the community of Messianic Judaism, it's totally meaningless. You can't take that piece of paper and wave it in front of the rabbis at the check-in counter at Ben Gurion Airport. They're going to say, oh, I'm Jewish now, look at this. They're going to say, get back on the plane. You know? Well, yeah, you can come as a tourist, give us your money, then leave. You know, but you're not going to be able to stay here as a Jew. There's no aliyah. There's no aliyah for a Messianic conversion. Okay, so what's the purpose? Then, amongst other Messianic communities, are you going to universally find acceptance because you have this sheet of paper that says you've made a conversion being Messianic Jewish?
No.
Okay. Well, okay, out here on the West Coast, we don't hear about this much, but it's actually a section of congregations up in around New York, New England area. They actually do make that difference. This is where some of this conversion to Messianic Judaism comes in, because they don't want Gentiles to convert. They will convert people being Messianic Jews as if that takes away the heat from the Orthodox. Problem is, the Orthodox are completely unimpressed with this sheet of paper, so it doesn't really work. So what's the big deal? The big deal goes back to kind of what we talked about in our reading. Why are you fighting and fighting and arguing with one another? Why are you judging one another? Okay? Why, if you're Jewish, are you judging a Gentile who's coming into the congregation and wants to learn halakha, learn Torah, and you're hating them because they're a Gentile, they're not a Jew? Is that godliness? Does Messiah jump and cheer when you do this? No, because what were the signs of the arrival of Messiah? What was one of the big signs that people were looking forward to when Messiah came? It was that the Gentiles will be included in the family of God as Gentiles. Okay, some of the scriptures that I quoted very quickly, we can post the actual notes of this sometime. We got it already? Okay. You go through those citations, and you can see where God's design was for Gentiles either. One thing I just thought about that I missed was in Acts, when the Ethiopian eunuch was heading away from Jerusalem back to Ethiopia, okay, and it was Philip who came along and taught him about, what was it? Isaiah 52, right? Isaiah 52. Yeah. What was it? He was going, okay, wait a second. I thought even eunuchs would be acceptable when Messiah comes. He gets turned away at the door, and now he's reading, trying to figure out what's going on. Philip straightens him out. And the eunuch asked to be baptized right there on the spot. Okay? So, this was the point. The arrival of the Gentile in the community as a Gentile is part of the prophecy. If we deny this, we deny prophecy, and what we're basically saying is Yeshua's work is not sufficient for the Goyim. That may come across as a little bit harsh, may come across a little bit hard. But the sad part is I've seen a lot of this happen here in Southern California. There's an attitude that doesn't matter where you come from, if you're Jewish, we want you, but we don't want the Goyim. That's a movie reference, sorry. And this is the difficulty. This is what we have to fight against. And it happens, and there's some people just want to keep Messianic Judaism as a nice little Jews-only club. And which is one of the reasons, demographically speaking, we have a very large percentage of Gentiles in this congregation, because we don't care. We'll take it. All you got to do is win over. But the only requirement I ask for is a desire to win. That's what Acts 15:21 is all about.
The Orthodox Church is completely against what we're doing here.
Yeah, they don't. Well, first of all, they don't like us because we're Messianic, and second, they don't like us because a large part of us are not Jewish. So here we are learning halakha, we're learning Torah, we're learning Hebrew, we're learning the first service, we're learning how to walk in God's ways, and that will drive any Orthodox totally bonkers nuts. Which, by the way, is exactly what we're supposed to be doing.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
It drives them crazy because it provokes them to jealousy.
Yeah, that's what the
Yes,
saying.
exactly.
That's the first stage.
Yeah. Yes, and you go to Romans 11, and that's our job, is to make the Jew jealous. How do you make a Jew
That's our
jealous?
job.
How do you make anybody jealous? Is that you are having something or doing something that only belongs to you.
Bring the Gentiles.
Okay? Someone drives out of the parking with your car, you're going to have a little bit of jealousy. Hey, that's my car.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay? Same idea. If we are into halakha, we are into Torah, we are into God's days, and we're living by God's lifestyle, and the Jew looks at that, they're going, wait, that's mine! That belongs to me! And why are you guys enjoying this?
Trying to get out.
Yeah, why are you happy about this? Right? Because one of the things the rabbi taught me once is, you always tell a proselyte from a native Jew. Okay? The proselyte will always go to the rabbi and say, hey rabbi, how do I do this particular commandment? And a natural data Jew will come to right and say, okay, how do I get out of doing this? Okay? So our love for obeying God's Torah, our love for walking in Torah and halakha, biblical halakha, it gives us, they look at that and drive me crazy. That's the job we're supposed to do. So the presence of the Gentile in the congregation is a necessary feature of a healthy Messianic congregation. And it doesn't matter if there's more Gentiles than Jews in the group. It doesn't matter. Our job is to provoke. Our job is to live a holy life, because that's what Yeshua brought us to. When he died on the cross, he brought us to the ability to learn how to live a holy life. Okay? Okay. Number 6 on the list. Do you have any members of your congregation or organization who have undergone the process of conversion to Messianic Judaism? None. We don't do it. Okay. Questions 7 and 8 were removed from the questionnaire that I'll be seeing. Mark showed me that on the report for this that I never got until this morning. I didn't know there was a final report. They never gave it to me. But apparently those questions were still on that group. I'll have to look it over and see what's there. Anyways, number 9. To what extent is the issue of conversion significant in the life and activities of your congregation, so your congregation? I can't fix somebody else's English. Congregation organization. Please give illustrations or example. None. Gentiles and women are fully integrated into the life of the congregation, including leadership and participation in all aspects of worship. I added women in that one just to add an extra little. God, I love it.
We even let women in.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, number 10. What further comment or questions about conversion to Messianic Judaism would you like to see addressed in this paper? 10. Okay, get a little bit wordy here. I see the entire Messianic conversion issue as pandering to a misinterpretation of the power of Orthodox Judaism over Messianic Judaism. This has been a long-standing mistake by Messianics, mainly seeking approval of the Orthodox, when such approval is not needed, and seeking same only weakens the good news as declared in the Scripture. Anyone say amen to that?
Amen.
We stand on the work of Yeshua, not orthodoxy, and should represent the presence of Gentiles as the proof of Yeshua's messiahship, and not be ashamed by the result of Gentiles seeing that great light. That's a hint to Isaiah that says, those who are far off have seen a great light. Which is exactly why during Sukkot in the temple times there was a giant candlestick 50 yards high, being a great light that spoke, among other things, of being a great light to the Gentiles so they may come. Sorry, you had your hand up.
Yeah, at a convenient point, okay, to you, in your presentation here, could you please define Messianic Judaism using words that would speak to a Christian who was raised in, let's say, a Baptist church, who had never heard the term Messianic Judaism, who hearing this term for the first time would misconstrue what that means?
No. I'm just kidding. Okay, Messianic Judaism, I usually define as that branch of Judaism which embraces Yeshua as Messiah. Okay? We are culturally Jewish focused, as you can tell by our prayer service and all the stuff we do. It's culturally Jewish focused, Jewish culturally focused, as well as embracing those points of halakha, which means the law for how we live our lives on a daily basis, in a manner that's consistent with biblical and traditional practices, as long as those traditional practices do not violate Torah, God's commands, or against things which Yeshua spoke against. Okay? For example, Yeshua never said, don't keep the Sabbath. They had lots of arguments with the Pharisees over how they kept the Sabbath and what their expectations were of other people keeping the Sabbath. He had many arguments about that, but he never said, don't keep the Sabbath. So the rule that we follow is that the Sabbath is God's day.
I was listening to a friend right
There's
now.
like getting an amen there.
Wasn't he? By the way, I think I forgot.
Oh. Don't ask me to repeat that because I won't remember. So we are culturally Jewish facing. We are biblical in our practice. And we use Messiah's guidelines and how he kept some traditions but argued strongly against others. In other words, the ones that worked, the ones that were good, he kept. For example, he did not completely rewrite the prayer service in the synagogue, but rather he waited till the time of the prophet's reading. When he was called up to read from the prophets, he found a spot in Isaiah 61, and he spoke about himself doing that. Okay? So, he worked within the tradition. Okay? The style of wearing the tzitzit that he was wearing when the lady with the issue controlled his.
So,
The hem of his garment is tzitzit.
and what sort of also what I'm trying to distinguish in my question is the tradition from the basic elements of what every Christian should respond to. There's nothing wrong with having a Judaism style focus in terms of tradition. It can be very, very good, but to distinguish the elements of what is tradition and what is, I don't know any other word but required, what we should do. Let's say I wanted to remain non-Judaic, if that's even a word, okay, but still be compliant in a way that would be approved of by our Lord. And that line, I think, is important to understand.
Okay.
And I want to get to that.
Okay. And as far as the difference would be concerned, Ellie Shaver, can you close that door, please? Keep shutting it, people. Okay, I see what you're getting at. As far as our congregation is concerned, we are a more Jewish cultural setting. Okay? It doesn't have to be that way. You can have a completely non-Jewish Messianic kind of thing. And in fact, I'm not exactly an expert on the whole of it, but I believe from what little bit I've seen, what's called the Hebrew Roots movement tends to be a non-Jewish Messianic function. There's not a lot of Jewish tradition in what they do, but they do seek to follow what Torah says about the right lifestyle. Okay? So is it wrong? No. It's just a different cultural approach. Okay? Yes.
You have to remember that what we're dealing here with is a Jewish document. It was written there by those people and all that. And in the book of Acts, and I was looking for it, I can't find it, I don't remember where it is. But Paul was making a defense of himself at Caesarea, right? And one of the things that he was accused of was violating the Jewish law. And what they called him, they said that he was of the sect of the Nazarene, which means
He was of the sect of
the sect of the Nazarene, which was followers of the Nazarene.
Oh, okay.
The original believers, they still went to the temple. They still went to the synagogues. They were practicing, but they were known as Nazarene or followers of the Nazarene. The same way that you have other rabbis that people follow. You see? So, to say if there's a way that we can see, a lot of what we became used to in our worship in Christianity came from pagan sources. So we're trying to recognize, for me anyway, I had to try to reconcile all of this here stuff that I grew up with and that I loved, you see, with what the Bible was saying. And when I realized, that the New Testament was telling me how to apply the Old Testament, that the Old Testament had not been cast away. It wasn't cast away and now we got something new. And that was what was in my head. So, and
Well,
that's,
I'm 3 years into that revelation, but okay,
Yeah.
go on.
yeah, but what I'm saying is, even in the Jewish roots movement, okay, and they're trying to get back to a lot of what's biblical, they still, with the church thing, have the trappings of the pagan religions. You see what I'm saying?
Well, I
I
haven't
don't know if I
experienced
want to put
that.
it quite that strong.
I haven't
Yeah.
experienced any Jewish roots except this. Okay, so I just got fed up and started looking, and Yaffa was very cunning. So that's why we're here.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it depends on who's asking the question to begin with. Second, you always say, quick prayer, Lord, tell me what to say before I answer. Generally, as a rule of thumb, I tell people, because most of the time people think I'm Jewish, because of the fact they know I keep the Sabbath, I don't eat pork, and so they automatically, if you're keeping the Sabbath and you don't eat pork, that makes you Jewish, to most Christians.
And I'll take it as a compliment.
So, generally, as a rule, all I tell them is it means I read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation with the understanding, knowing that nothing changed throughout from beginning to end, that God is God the Father and Yeshua is His Son, who came to be Messiah to the world. As it is written in Scripture, not as men has taught it. And that's been the problem throughout the ages, because Yeshua said He came and that He would not change or remove one jot or tittle from the law. Okay? So it may resemble Judaism, but who was the creator of what we call Judaism today? God the Father. It's following His rules as He asked them to be written down. It's living a life as He asked us to live it. Has nothing to do with what we call Judaism, as much as it is to be obedient to God the Father in the way He asked us to be, and not to be rebellious and defiant, in which the church has taught us to be in a lot of ways. Not intentionally, but by, this goes back to 300 years after the death of Christ, when the misunderstandings started to occur, because you have competitions and breakouts here and there. And just understand, I don't live a Jewish lifestyle. People perceive it as a Jewish lifestyle. We do say the prayers and stuff in Hebrew, but then again, most of the book was written in Hebrew to begin with, so it helps to understand that Hebrew. Also helps to understand that God is going to bring us back to an original language, and I believe that He started in Hebrew, He's probably going to return us to Hebrew. That we're all going to have one language when Yeshua comes back. So that's why I want to learn the prayers in Hebrew. There's also, because of things get lost in translation, if you learn the Hebrew and can say the Hebrew, then you know things are not getting lost.
You're talking about the element of why it is a good thing to celebrate the Judaic tradition. Okay?
Now, I'll tell you the problem with the term of Messianic Judaism.
Say that
Because
again. I'll tell you the what?
there's a problem with the term Messianic Judaism
Okay.
from begin with, because you have congregations that are Calvary chapels that have just only on the Star of David in their congregation. That's the only difference. You also have Orthodox congregations they're totally if you walked in, they're totally Orthodox Jewish. They've separated the men from the women. They don't dance on the Shabbat. The only difference is they believe that Yeshua is the Messiah to the Jews. So you have this vast 180-degree difference in groups of people that all call themselves Messianic Jews. So trying to pinpoint one or the other is very, very difficult, because if you ask one of the Messianic synagogues down the road, they would just tell you that it's understanding that Yeshua is the Jewish Messiah, and that's it. And that they were Jews and they found Yeshua, but nothing in their style. They don't keep the Sabbath, they don't follow the food laws, they don't do any of that. Okay? And then the other end, you have the ones that separate the men and the women. They can't fellowship, they can't touch. The women have to be covered from head to toe, they have to have their heads wrapped, covered, their wig, just like the Orthodox Jews do. So Messianic Judaism has this vast, vast differences. So I can only come from the definition of how I live my life. And why I call myself a Messianic Jew, I have to identify.
Perhaps another attempt at a definition for you, to go all the way around the circle, is the advantage of the culture of being in a Messianic Jewish environment is that it's more conducive to keeping the commandments of God than other methods of meeting and it's easier to keep the Sabbath in a Messianic Jewish congregation than it is in a congregation that doesn't honor the Sabbath. It's easier to observe Passover in a congregation amongst the people who observe Passover than a congregation that doesn't recognize anything about Passover, except every week you have this little piece of French bread and a little bit of grape juice. Yeah. And so, from my point of view, the advantages are much, and the definition is much helpful because it helps us to keep the commandments. It's set up to help us keep the commandments. And it gives us traditional legs upon which we may keep those commandments. Rather than having the tradition wheel all together for ourselves, we can do what's gone before and be comfortable with the fact that they've already done the pioneering. It's already been worked out.
The traditions are good because they are conducive to learning.
And the ones that are not, according to our example in the Messiah, the greatest example we have, is you don't need those. So if the tradition doesn't help, don't do it. If the tradition does help, then help yourself to it. That's kind of how he taught things. Okay.
I have a comment on that. I do not know whether I am Messianic or whatever as far as religion is concerned. I am a believer of Yeshua. I believe in the 10 Commandments, and I also believe in the rest of it, because if you believe one side, you believe the whole thing. You either believe it all or you don't believe it. Everybody said, well, this is the book. Well, if it is the book, it's got to be complete. It's got to be the old and the new, and you have to put it together. You respect and you abide and you study, and if that, you can call me whatever you want, Messianic, Jew, whatever. This is what I believe in, and I am going to stick to those beliefs, and I'm going to do as best as I can. I am going to fail so many times. I do it 20 times a day, 70 times 70, and 70 times 70. He does forgive me, and that's what I believe, and that's where I stand. So that's it.
Okay, let's move on.
Can I say one more thing real quick?
Well, you're my boss, I guess.
It's interesting is I have never been one to light Shabbat candles. My daughter's home, she does it. But I never light Shabbat candles. It's tradition, it's not important. My son and I, about 2 weeks ago, we had gone into a juice place, and while we were waiting for our juices, they had a TV show on. And the girl's waiting for her date to show up for dinner. So she's got the house all clean, she's got the tablecloth out, she has the table all set. And she had 2 candles sitting in the center of the table that she was like lighting, waiting for the love of her life to come in. And I sat there and I started crying. Because that's the meaning of lighting the candles on the Sabbath. It's because it's a preordained date with your spouse that's going to show up and be with you during that time period. And so if you're going to sit there and light candles for a guy you met 3 days ago walking down the street and you invited over for dinner, why in the world would you not set your table out and light candles waiting for the Father to come and sit down with you and spend the Sabbath with you?
It is an appointed time.
It's an appointed time.
And even though the lighting of the candles is a tradition, do we not look forward to it? Does it not make a big difference for us? You know, would you feel cheated if for some reason we didn't light the candles, right?
I haven't done it yet, but that's on my list, my
Well,
to-do list.
I'm looking for agreement with my family that it's a very good and important thing. Even though it's a tradition, there's this thing about marking the beginning of the Sabbath that people find really precious. And so even though it's a tradition, it's a wonderful thing.
Another tradition I do, which is strange, is the blessing of the children. Because I think that's really important, you know, and it's funny is my son's generally out running around on Shabbat, or he's sitting at a friend's house or something, and my daughter's out in New York, so around 3 o'clock in the afternoon our time, I send her the blessings, and that she has it by the time the sun sets in New York. And then later in the evening, just before sunset here, I'll send it to my son. Well, about 3 months ago, he started dating a girl. And she was wondering why his phone was always beeping at sunset on Friday. And so he showed her the prayer that I'd said, and she thought, oh, that's really beautiful and so special.
Shabbat shalom, Dennis.
And about a month ago, my son came in and he goes, Mom, will you send the blessing for me and Rebecca? Will you send the blessing for Martha also? And she has so much appreciated that because she knows that somebody has taken the time to sit down and actually pray for her and offer a blessing over her that probably her parents have never even done. And it was funny, my friend got really upset. Well, I pray for my kids all the time. I go, and they know I pray for them. I go, that's fine. You know, I know my husband loves me too, but it's really nice when he takes time to buy a card and actually write it down. You know, or do something that little extra special. I go, for me, you know, my kids see the text as a greeting card, reminding them that their mom loves them and is taking the time to pray for them every week, blessing them and asking them to have a blessed Sabbath and a good week that my parents are covering them. And now his girlfriend just, you know, this is a totally strange thing for her, and she's just like in tears every time I send it to her. So, yeah.
And that's, again, that's tradition, but it turns out to be very beneficial. And my family loves it. Please nod.
I never ever heard of any of that stuff.
All right, that's cool. We'll talk. Your wife will love it.
Well, we have something similar. I mean, I've prayed the same prayer over our voice. It's not the same thing, but before they go to bed. And, you know, it's the same
No,
kind of thing.
no, pray the prayer.
You know, it's the same kind of thing. And they love it, and they look forward to it.
Okay.
She prays
Let me see if I can find a
prays
reason
as
around.
well.
We stand on the work of Yeshua, that orthodoxy should present the presence of Gentiles as proof of Yeshua's messiahship, and not be ashamed by the result of Gentiles seeing that great light. I have had this argument with many different Messianic leaders over the years, and they have yet to provide, ever, a biblical basis for requiring Gentiles to convert. The only argument raised is while we are equal in stature, there are differences in function, we provide no biblical support for this opinion. This basically comes down to the difference between husbands and wives, between owners and slaves. That Jews have a different function than Gentiles. And I've yet to see that actually work out well. That's not a good argument to raise. Especially since God's commandment is that if a foreigner comes and wants to join himself to Israel and walks in the commandments, he is to be considered as one who is native born. In other words, no differentiation, inclusion. Messianic Judaism has missed the inclusion part of this commandment. In my opinion. Okay. I should add our congregation embraces traditional forms of worship and halakha, following Messiah's instructions concerning halakha. It's one of the most traditional liturgical services in California. We accomplish this without creating a second-class status for Gentiles and women. And that was my final comment on the response. And what follows then is a short, there's a lot of scriptures to look up, so you guys can do that on your own time. But since there are two, the title is, what is the role of the Gentile in the Messianic movement? Okay. There are two intertwined issues concerning Gentiles within Israel, this part of the Messianic movement. First, Gentiles have been integrated into Israel. There's a whole big slew of citations to that. Next, the inclusion of Gentiles as Gentiles is a sign of the atoning work and kingship of Messiah. And a whole bunch of other verses we'll look at. In addition to fully participating in the congregation life, fully participating in, good thing I checked this before I published it. In addition to fully participating in the congregation life and practice, Gentiles have a unique obligation within Messianic Judaism. That's Romans 10:9 and Deuteronomy 32:21. Because Israel provoked God by following after gods that are not the real God, He will provoke Israel through a people who had no covenant with God. Romans 11:11. That's basically the point. Gentiles, your obligation, it's not necessarily your assignment should you decide to accept it, but it's your obligation to provoke the Jews to jealousy. And again, we talked about that. It's done by lovingly embracing the commandments of God and following after them with joy and satisfaction. And to whatever extent that it works for you, the traditions. And again, we're not married to the traditions, but they can be very useful and beneficial. So, okay. You can, what does it mean to provoke to jealousy? Again, according to Rabbi Webster, it means to provoke, to bring about, irritate, jealousy, suspiciously watchful, distrustful of the faithfulness of, envious, anxiously solicitous for. And jealousy is the emotion felt when something that is rightfully yours is in the hands of another. That's my definition. Okay. So then how then do we provoke the Jews' jealousy? By Gentiles having that which belongs to you, a special relationship with God and His commandments. And I left off citing all the references. You guys can pick that up on your study after this and which you can download. So, questions, comments, reviews. Okay, first review.
Now, an interesting artifact when we talk about provoking to jealousy, one of the things that I participated in a ultra-Orthodox service and was wearing my tzitzit and my kippah. And the rabbi was curious because, well, I had blue in my tzitzit, which the ultra-Orthodox do not believe, because we don't know what color blue the blue should be. They don't have blue. So this provoked him to ask me, why do I have blue? And to basically reveal what my biblical, theological background is. Which, it started off kind of, okay, is this going to be the atypical, Christian playing Jew playing I'm better than you? And when it is the Gentile who provokes to jealousy 4,000 years of persecution behind them today. And so they have great reason to doubt and to be suspicious of all Gentiles. As the rabbi had said, why would anybody choose to take on 613 commandments when all you have is 70? And Noah, like, why would you? And my response was, well, to be pleasing to the Lord. And that was, that was thought provoking. But it was interesting that when properly approached, instead of trying to proselytize the Jew with the cross and the Bible, and don't try and proselytize, but rather try to embrace as a brother, go so much further in your relationship with them, and you can continue to be a witness to the gospel, to the good news, without upsetting them. That's what I want to share.
Yeah.
The word provoke, to bring it out, to irritate. To make a pearl of great price, you have to irritate the wisdom. So we're helping in their development and their function to make them better people, not like irritating them. Because, like several months ago, I ended up having a meeting with two Jewish men. One was Jewish, the other one had recently become a Christian. And when he found out that I believed in Jesus, he was trying to keep Torah, wouldn't buy, sell, or anything on Shabbat. Even the Jewish guy thought I was crazy with that because they can't even keep that one. And I thought, and it was through the conversation, it was funny because it really irritated both of them because the guy converted from Judaism to Christianity so that he wouldn't have to keep Torah. And that's why he was leaving his friend to teach him about Jesus so that his friend wouldn't have to free him from Torah. And that's how they saw, that's how the one that converted to Christianity saw Jesus. Jesus came and died to free him from being Jewish. And I sat there and, it's totally just the opposite. He came to tell you that you didn't have to follow the Pharisaical rules, but you have to keep Torah and obey Torah, but not all the Pharisaical rules that were wrapped around it. God wants you to walk through the gate, but He doesn't need you to put up a 3-mile barrier around the gate, so it makes it impossible to walk through.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, rebukes? Barriers are up because, We talk about this all the time, the Deuteronomy 13 test, right? If someone comes along, doesn't matter what they say, doesn't matter what they do, if they tell you to not do what Moses said to do, they're a false prophet. And Judaism in general takes a look at a lot of what Christianity does and say, that's a false prophet, because they're saying, don't do what Moses. So you get
Also, remember Ruth did exactly what Naomi asked her to do. She followed the directions. And when she was told to do a specific thing, stay at the perimeter of this particular field. She did that when she was told to go to Boaz and do particular thing. She only did those particular things.
Yeah.
She did no more, she did no less.
Realistically, Ruth came not as a Moabite, but as a daughter-in-law. So her status was different. She came in with a slightly different status.
When I look into the family of Naomi, how did that work? Because I imagine that the Naomi family was same mentality as the other Jews, you know what I'm saying? So how did they welcome her as a family?
Well, apparently, wherever they stayed, they were not part of anybody else's family. They lived alone.
Oh,
So